Before we dive into the book of Judges, you need to know that it's a little nasty. And that is a weird word to say in a sermon, but I'm committing to it. We are dropping into the messiness of making a home. Israel has made its way through the Exodus out of Egypt and now struggle to settle the promised land. In the outline of the biblical story, the era of Judges exists in what archaeologists call Iron Age 1. And in this liminal space, before they had kings, Israel sought leadership from judges more accurately imagined as tribal chieftains. The book of Judges collects stories of these tribal chieftains responding to crises, and their involvement always takes the same pattern. The people sin and turn away from Yahweh. They fall into the hands of oppressors. They cry out. Yahweh sends a deliverer, a chieftain judge to rescue them. There is some respite, a time of peace. Then that deliverer dies, the people sin, you get it, the cycle continues. As far as the scope of Judges, at the beginning, these leaders start off okay, then not so good. And by the end, they're downright horrific. The kings to come will do something similar, start out okay, but then mostly go downhill from there. Cycles follow cycles, follow cycles. All of these stories are here, I think, to do one thing. I think they're here to break our hearts because we know something about destructive cycles too. But before all of that, Deborah, a prophet under a palm tree. We'll begin with Judges 4, verses 4 to 9. Now, Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at the time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And Israelites went up to her to have their disputes settled. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them to Mount Tabor. I will send Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give them into your hands." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." "Certainly, I will go with you," said Deborah. "But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours. For the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. Okay, I love this. Deborah, a prophet. Except the text doesn't say just that. It says that she's a woman prophetess, Isha Neviah in Hebrew. The text is getting out in front of how unusual this figure is. Like, get a load of this judge, a woman. And the second description of Deborah in the NIV has her as the wife of Lapidoth. But Lapidoth is not likely a person. There's no trace of anyone by that name in ancient texts, biblical or otherwise, so some scholars present a couple other options. Lapidoth could be the town she's from, but that is a far cry too. There's no evidence that such a place existed. And second, Lapidoth can be looked at etymologically. The building blocks of the Hebrew construction are ishet, meaning woman, possibly compared to her male counterpart in the story Barak, and Lapidoth, which can translate as flames. Deborah reads as a woman of flames. Or in Will Gaffney's translation, Deborah is a fiery woman. I think I wore this shirt to kind of make that point, which makes sense alongside this codependent warrior, Barak. Deborah outshines Barak in every way. She is sought out for her wisdom. She is listened to. She wisely sees into the future, saying, "Barak, buddy, your worst enemy will be defeated, not by your hands, but by the hands of a woman." And I like to imagine that her eyes with smile lines flashed with some fire too. Like she's in on the joke at just how strange and surreal her life had become. Now, remember how a moment ago I told you that I think these stories are here to break your heart? The book of Judges is not categorical history. It is chronologically all over the map, and it is haunting if you read it in your little devotionals as a sacred text. It's pretty bleak. So it helps to think of Judges as liturgical scripture. It's forming something in us. As a way to form faithfulness in you, you're given this portrait of people who lose their way. You notice how their relationship with place and land is disordered. And you notice how their relationship with stuff and with strangers is in disarray. You notice these cycles of sin and spiritual deadness. They love idols. They hate enemies. They have little trust, little awe, little love. Daniel Sulak, in his book, Gift of the Grotesque, which is my favorite title I've come across in a while, summarizes the stories in Judges as a theological dark age where Israel wanders into a spiritual maze where left turn after left turn after left turn always takes God's people back to the place where they began, the chronic despoliation of the promised land. In other words, these people at this time spoil everything. But even in the dark, even in the stink, even in this labyrinthine maze, there are flashes of inspiration and wisdom and lightness of being and humor and humanity. This fiery woman under a palm is all of that. And Judges on a whole will not really get better. But as a sacred text, we're meant to be broken open by the story to remember that, yeah, life can be so brutal and even grotesque, and wisdom can still be found as a fiery presence taking our hand and leading us through the battle up ahead. And sometimes wisdom even makes its way into our hearts like a song. The truth is, the story of Deborah and Barak and their enemy Sisera and this foreign woman to come named Jael, it was a song before it was this story. Judges 5 is called the Song of Deborah and includes some of the oldest Hebrew in the Bible. Historical critics believe that Judges 5 is an older poetic version of the story in Judges 4, meaning the song came first. And the Song of Deborah is similar to text we've encountered before, back in Exodus 15, after Moses leads the Israelites through the sea at night on dry land. Moses and Miriam sing this incredible song of victory, a song of liberation. And Walter Brueggemann notes that these songs, and especially the Song of Deborah, is one of Israel's most formidable and earliest articulations of faith in Yahweh. So they didn't start with a textbook or a bunch of memory verses or a treatise or a finely tuned argument. They know themselves in a song. Isn't that a comfort? If you're a little bit like me, listening to the same Phoebe Bridgers song on repeat for an entire evening, and then you just keep doing that all summer long. We don't always know why we find ourselves in a song, but there's something about its melody or its lyrics that speak our truth. So listen to some of these lyrics in Judges 5. Deborah says, "Hear this, you kings, listen, you rulers, even I, will sing to the Lord. In the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned. Travelers took to winding paths," meaning it was a very scary time. And so God chose new leaders when war came to our city gates. The remnant and the nobles came down. The people of the Lord came down against the mighty. From the heavens, the stars fought. from their courses they fought against Sisera. These are poetic expressions of people who need a God to fight for them. Like, that's how they understand themselves, worthy of divine allyship, even through cycles of estrangement and disloyalty. And so, Barak summons fighters, 10,000 men under his command, and Deborah goes with him. They make camp. Word gets out to Sisera that the people he oppresses are about to fight back, and Sisera in turn gathers all his men and 900 chariots fitted with iron. The mention of chariots of iron is not literal. Chariots of this time are wooden, maybe with a little bit of reinforced iron, so a little swag. And the iron description exaggerates how terrifying Sisera's military machine had become, having spent 2 decades oppressing Deborah's people. The Israelites, bullied for so long, are up against a monster. And here's what happens next. Judges 4, beginning in verse 14. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots, an army by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Barak chases the chariots further, and all Sisera's troops fall by the sword. We're told not a man was left. Verse 17, Sisera meanwhile fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was an alliance between Jabin, king of Hazor, Sisera's king, and the family of Heber the Kenite, Jael's husband's family. And at this point in the story, you might be drifting off a little bit. Yeah. God's people, they'll prevail. It's a foregone conclusion. But what you need to pay attention to is this lone man who was once a henchman of oppression, running away from the battlefield, out of breath maybe, a gash across his forehead from the fight, pulling back a tent door to assume his protection. Verse 18, Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent, and she covered him up with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. "Stand at the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone in there?' say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he was fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. I told you this is bleak. Just then, Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. Hope you didn't mind my dramatic reading. On that day, subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him. This story is sick, and by sick I mean it's so good. It's such high drama. And before you go thinking, where did all of this come from? Remember, Deborah predicted all of it. She told Barak, when he chickened out from the fight, that because he didn't march forward with the orders on his own, the true hero of the story would be a woman. And maybe when you heard that, you thought, "Wow, Debbie, confident. I like it." And if so, you're forgiven for not realizing Deborah wasn't even speaking of herself. She points to a different hero, a woman outside the tribes of Israel, at camp behind enemy lines. Jael brings down a warrior and with him a whole kingdom. And now you know you're in a biblical story where the strong are shamed by the weak. The stranger turns out to be your unlikely salvation, and any moment of oppression will be found out and pinned to the ground where it belongs. But hey, I get it. This story is wild, and it's a little nasty. A woman welcomes an enemy into her tent, lulls him to sleep with warm milk and a cozy blanket. And then she sneaks up on him, and the song in chapter 5 paints a picture of his head between her legs. And he dies, and at her hand, with a phallic tent peg, her weapon. So if you sense sexual innuendo, you are correct. That's exactly how ancient audiences would have heard this story. Sisera doesn't die at the hands of a temptress, as some commentators claim. He dies at the hand of a woman who actually bends gender. She is the one with the peg in her hand. And in my opinion, it is the strangeness of this small win that makes the story shine so bright. What if, below the surface of this sensational tale, we could sense the divine economy of gift? People say this all the time: the world is burning, curse it all. And after yet another week of heat warnings, it certainly feels like it's burning. And honestly, I think that's how they felt in Judges. Just chaos in politics, tribes polarized, abuse of power and the poor. But somehow, the text never loses sight of the humanity of these figures: the woman who was sought out for her wisdom under a palm tree, the man of battle who knew his limitations, the enemy seen as a scared, tired boy, exhausted from the fight, and a woman who, should she let that man rest and revive and live, would likely have become his next victim. Love might seem so small in Judges. Winning looks kind of like losing. A world might feel like it's burning. But the divine economy of gift loves small wins. Small wins, like a little bit of good advice. And the friend who is on your side, and the times you don't lose your cool, and that one deep breath that connects you to the present moment. A beautiful sunrise you only caught the tail end of, a simple prayer that just goes, thank you. When I read the story of Deborah as a story of light through the lens of Jesus, I'm reminded that God loves all of life, all of it. The judge, the scoundrel, the betrayer, the denier, the fool. And we do well to seek wisdom and defend goodness like Deborah and Jael, however imperfectly, however small that win. Because there is a point to all of this, especially in dark times. And that point is, it's love. It's that simple. In the words of Deborah's own victory song, love so bright, it shines like the sun. So in Judges 5, there is one more character we haven't met. Near the end of the song, in verse 28, we spot Sisera's mother waiting for her son to return from battle. 5 verse 28. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she cried out, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed?" And the wisest of her ladies answer her, and indeed she keeps saying to herself, "Are they not finding and dividing the spoils, a woman or two for each man? Colorful garments as plunder for Sisera, colorful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my own neck, all of this plunder." And the song provides this really ironic twist. Sisera was a son. He came from between a woman's legs, and he died between a woman's legs. And that full circle picture is so tragic, you kind of have to laugh. I know it feels weird, but this victory song adds a flourish for our imagination, saying, remember how Sisera oppressed us and beat us down for 2 decades. Well, he finally got what was coming to him all the way back to his mother. We'll never have to worry about him again. This is what the people sing to just express how it feels to finally be free. Whenever they could, however possible, they find a little levity. How incredibly human of them. Sometimes humor in a hard time is really all the light you're going to get. But there's so much power in laughter. And in fact, light is the metaphor that we end on. The whole account concludes in 5:31. So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. And the land had peace 40 years. I don't know who your enemies are or what your most painful prayers sound like when you just want to curse. But I delight in this image of love blazing and bringing us strength, helping us rise. So let me encourage you, go find some hilarious and unlikely heroes. Welcome new perspective. Uncover the light and trust that God empowers you to be fully who you are. I bless the light that lifts you, bringing you peace, I hope, for years.